Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining today's Destination LoRaWAN webcast hosted by the LoRa Alliance. We do have a full agenda and a great discussion today, so we will be getting started straight away here today. So thank you again for joining. During today's Destination LoRaWAN webcast, panelists will be discussing sustainable buildings of the future. If you're new to Destination LoRaWAN, our series, or need a few reminders on how to maximize your experience here today, there are a few housekeeping notes on the screen here for you. Pressing F5 on your keyboard will refresh your screen if you see that your video or audio is off or behind. There's also a toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and pressing the help box will direct you to solve some of the technical issues if you experience any on the webcast today. Another helpful box just below this video box here is the Q&A box, where you can submit your questions throughout the webcast to the panelists, and we will be getting to some of them at the end of today's discussion. So it's that Q&A box right here below this video box. Submit your questions there, and we will be answering a few at the end of the webcast. Lastly, you will see in the webcast resources list a link to the LoRa Alliance and TIA white paper that the panelists will be discussing and referring to today. So I highly recommend downloading the white paper and saving the link. A quick thank you to today's webcast sponsor, MileSite, who is an active member of the LoRa Alliance and is helping to make this webcast possible today by being a Destination LoRaWAN sponsor. MileSite, as one of the many solutions they offer, has a smart building kit that is enabled by LoRaWAN. And to learn more about that starter kit and MileSite, click the links in their sponsor box on your console. So thank you again to MileSite. Lastly, as always, a special thank you to our Destination LoRaWAN series sponsors who help make all of our webcasts possible. Thank you to our gold sponsor, who is MachineQ, a Comcast company, and to our two silver sponsors, Birds and Charter Communications. Today, we have a quick message from Birds, and then we will get started with today's discussion. So quickly over to Bruno from Birds to give us a short sponsor message, and then we will kick off with today's webcast. Thank you again.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Bruno Hamamlian. I'm the Strategic Marketing Director at Birds. Birds is a company involved in the LoRa Alliance since the beginning. Our vision and what we do on a daily basis is to support municipal clients, commercial and industries, building to move towards digital transformation of their assets and operation. We truly believe that instrumenting more and collecting more environmental data is useful to better improve environmental footprint in the cities. At Birds, we are 170 IoT enthusiasts. We have been founded in 2017, but before that, we were working already within the Veolia group as M2 City and Home Rider system. On one side, we had the first European private IoT operator that started actually to connect cities in France, and another one, a technologist that was investing its energy and know-how in designing IoTs that could last for decades. We have today, for the big numbers at a glance, 7 million devices that we've rolled out so far, and 3.4 million are operated daily in order to better serve the utility market and challenges. And one of our very proud statement is that the oldest IoT we've designed and we are operating still has just wishes its 18th birthday. We operate in smart water, smart waste, smart energy, and smart industries. And if you're looking for an industrial IoT and digital player that wants to help IoT massive adoption, just give a call. Have a very good webinar and talk to you soon.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar on sustainable smart buildings of the future. The webinar today is going to be brought to you by the LoRa Alliance, of course. For those of you who are new, the LoRa Alliance is a nonprofit organization of 500 or so member companies dedicated to the advancement of LoRaWAN protocol for smart building and other low-power wide area network applications in the Internet of Things. Our co-sponsor today is the Telecommunications Industry Association. TIA is about an 80-year-old organization, also a nonprofit. It's a standards definition organization, or SDO. It also consists of 400 plus members. And in recent years, it's added community type programs such as the one we're going to be discussing today, regarding smart buildings and a sustainable future. And you'll hear more about their assessment tools and programs for that application. I'm joined today by a very esteemed group of panelists. We will go through and let them introduce themselves. So we'll start first with Annie Bevan. Annie?
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all. I'm Annie. I'm the Global Head of Sustainability for Superior Essex Communications. We're one of the largest manufacturers of communication cable in North America. We support both enterprise and broadband networks and markets. And ultimately, we've been working on our sustainability program since the 2010 or so. And ultimately, we've been looking to expand the understanding of what is sustainability in the ICT industry. And when we think about sustainability, we think about it in three separate ways for our business. We think about it in terms of how our products, our communication cable, can help to support healthy materials initiatives throughout the built environment, and also thinking about how our products are reducing our carbon impact and supporting our customers' Scope 3 emission reduction goals. We think about it in terms of sustainable technology solutions and how power over Ethernet, so power and data being brought to end devices through a communication cable, can support occupant health and well-being, energy savings, operational carbon savings, and support green building standards like LEED Well Living Building Challenge. We've been intimately involved in the development of SPIRE, a smart building certification through TIA and UL, we're going to talk about today. And ultimately, we see power over Ethernet being a huge part of contributing to smart and sustainable buildings. And then also, how are we walking the talk as a company? How is our company and our manufacturing operations supporting the betterment of the world? And ultimately, we ask everyone to consider what's behind your walls. And if all else is equal, why wouldn't you choose sustainable? Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Annie. Thanks for your participation in the white paper and on the panel today. Next up, we have Josh Jacobs from Underwriters Lab, or UL.
Good morning, Byron. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today, no matter when you're listening to it. I'm with UL, Underwriters Laboratories. We are 127 years old. Most folks who are watching this probably think of us as the fire, electrical, structural verifier, right? The U.S. home has hundreds and hundreds of little UL marks all around it, and it's around the world now as well. We're a mission-driven organization, and our mission is to make the world a safer place. And it started, again, with the fire, electrical, structural concept that you're very familiar with. But safety is changing. I like to say that safety is situational. It depends on the situation you're in. Obviously, if you're concerned about a wall burning down, that is one situation. But we're in completely different situations at every moment of our days. As our buildings get smarter, as our technology gets smarter, the safety situation for that is fear of losing our data or someone hacking into us. Here in the United States, we're dealing with some of our infrastructure even being hacked just this week. So again, it's safety is situational. Well, again, with smart building concepts coming in, that's a new type of safety that needs to be thought about. My expertise area, my subject matter expertise, is sustainability. So it's wonderful, obviously, to hear Annie talk about it before it. And we work with organizations like Superior Essex on their sustainability mission. sustainability is just another word for safety. Again, when you think about it, we need to make the planet safer for us from a human health perspective. We also need to think about the carbon crisis that we're in the middle of and how to reduce that and be safer as a society. So again, really proud to be here, excited to talk to this group. I think we talked to each other through the white paper creation, Byron. You'll see it in the white paper when you read it, but today it'll be really fun to talk to everyone about it.
All right, thanks, Josh. Next up, we have Stefan Lindgren, and I apologize to any Swedish speakers who I'm sure I did not pronounce that with the correct accents. But...
no, that was perfect, Byron. Thank you. Yes, so my name is Stefan Lindgren. I'm the CTO of the Talkbull Group. Talkbull is a European company, or we're working in Europe, in Africa, in Central America. And I'm, as Byron said, based out of Sweden. So this really showed that the smart buildings are a global phenomenon, and trying to bring some of the European experience into this as well. So Talkbull, we've been working with IoT and telco networks since the year 2000. We're working a lot with smart buildings. We are a digitalization provider for clients, mainly in Europe, that runs 3.9 million square meters. Our main products and solutions is around air quality, energy optimization, and sub-metering. And all of this goes into the either to become more sustainable, to reduce the carbon dioxide footprint, and also to get the certifications in place, for example, with BREEAM or LEED or Spire, etc. All of these proof points that also makes a lot of economical sense from the for the industry. So in this crowd, I'm happy to provide some more concrete examples, what is done in industry, and why our partners and our clients have decided to do the certifications, and maybe inspire some of the companies why they should do this. And of course, global footprint and environment is important and key for everybody, but it's also quite a lot of economical sense as well. To be sustainable, that is really core of any kind of business today. And those that aren't sustainable, they will not be around for long. So happy to provide that, and we're very grateful to be in this panel.
Well, thanks again. Thanks to you for joining as well. Next up, we've got Mike Moran from Microshare.
Hi, Byron. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be on the panel. We're a smart facilities building, smart building company. We have, for the past 2 years, been offering a filtered dashboard approach to the smart facilities data that we create, much of which is overlapping with the kind of basic needs of an institution that's trying to gather ESG data or sustainability data to understand the performance of their fixed assets, but also to improve that performance and understand how things like reconfiguration or the return to work of people affects questions like air quality, airflow, the wellness of the interior spaces. So what we're hoping to understand from this webinar and to put out there in the world is the fact that many of these things are effectively bringing a double bottom line. In other words, you're doing the right thing for the performance and efficiency of your building, and at the same time, you are advancing the ball in terms of sustainability. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and cue up the next one, Byron.
All right, thank you. And our final panelist today is going to be Roman Nemish from Tiktaalik.
Hello, everybody. So I assume by now Tiktaalik is well known in the LoRa ecosystem. We are probably the largest provider of of carrier-grade gateways and devices. I think if I'm correct today, we have in excess of 12 gateways, different variants, obviously, and in excess of about 15 devices that we provide globally. And with that, obviously, there's a lot of applications that are being deployed in certain areas. And Tectonic started development of LoRaWAN systems in 2016. That's kind of as a part of our movement to IoT from 4G networks. And since then, we deployed a number of use cases, specifically in the sustainable, we'll call it building environments. And we learned really how people operate and how people use the environments. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the use cases we learned how people operate. And we see that definitely the changes happening over the last even 2 years, what the use cases are and where the focus is changing today from, in a sustainable building environment. And it'll be my pleasure to share it today with you.
Great, thanks to you too. And I am Byron B. Miller, the moderator. I am here as the head of the Smart Building Work Group within the LoRa Alliance. I work for a company called Semtech, who is a proud founding member of the LoRa Alliance. Semtech itself is a 60-year-old semiconductor company. We do a number of different things, but the relevant one to what we're talking about here today has to do with our wireless RF technology called LoRa. And it is the physical layer underpinning of the LoRaWAN protocol and enables long distance communications for IoT devices over using very low power, so very long battery lives. And I'm pleased to be here and honored to be hosting the discussion. So with that, we will jump into the conversation. The topic here is smarter buildings and impact on sustainability. There is an accompanying white paper which you will be able to download. You'll see the link there on your screen. Encourage you to do that because we won't cover all the topics that are covered in the white paper here today. I read somewhere you should never ask questions that you don't already know the answer to, but we're throwing that out the window today, and we're just going to have a very informative, freewheeling discussion here. So we'll kind of jump right into that. So let me just start, I guess, with Josh, and sort of a baseline couple of questions here of when we talk about smart buildings, what is a smart building? Common definition, and how has that changed over time?
So Byron, it's really an interesting question from a standpoint of what is smart. We each define it differently, right? We've kind of we've all put different things up here. In my world, what smart means is a more sustainable building, right? So I'm sure that your organization defines it differently. Annie's and Roman's and Mike, we all kind of define it a little bit differently. Mine specifically is defining it as more sustainable, right? A healthier for us building, right? That can bring in fresh air when sensors, when Stefan's sensors happen to say that, there's too much CO2 in the building or VOCs get too high. Okay, we should increase the outdoor air intake, right? That's a smart building. A building is helping you be safer inside. And again, that's changed, right? You made mention, how has it changed? Well, the technology that all your companies make and that we verify, right? We're becoming smarter and smarter, knowing what we don't know and allowing technology to help us, right? So I would say a smart building to me and my organization at the moment in my expertise area is, again, that line where you're making sure that the building isn't using more resources than it needs to, and that it's staying healthy for the individuals that have to be inside of it.
Okay, thank you. And Stefan, do you want to elaborate on that? I know you have probably the most experience in the European market among the panelists here today. So, from your perspective, how do you define a smart building?
Yeah, I guess I agree that the definition is probably as many as there are people working in it. But what really, in our definition that we are using internally, that is how to get things done automatically, how to get data working in order to get away with a lot of manual processes, how to avoid a lot of waste in it, how to create more value for the people in the building by having it always customized and always in perfect conditions, and also how to make the building itself more sustainable, to avoid damages to the buildings, etc. So it goes everything from the base structure to the more running and facility management, to the inhabitants or the people in the buildings that are using the building. And of course, the more that you are addressing the people in an office, that it has a higher value compared to what you do with the base of the building when it comes to the concrete and everything. But everything needs to be addressed and can be addressed, and also that it can be addressed throughout the total lifetime of a building, from planning and construction to operations to reuse and renovate.
Okay. Kind of a follow-up corollary to that, I'd like to address to Annie and Mike maybe. So, you know, think economic, societal, regulatory environment have you know, changed in the last 10 years certainly. You know, what sort of drivers or I guess which of those do you think is the main driver in this interest towards smarter buildings and more sustainable buildings? Annie, maybe if you want to start.
Sure. Well, I come from a place of impact. 40% of all global carbon emissions are due to the built environment. 11% of those global carbon emissions is due to the built environment supply chain. 90% of all ailments are based on everyday exposures, human health impact in the built environment. These are some big facts that I think are becoming more prominently known. And we have a responsibility as practitioners, no matter what seat we sit in the built environment, to make an impact, to reduce that impact of the built environment. And I think wide awareness of the impact of the built environment is driving some things, as well as then, quite frankly, money talks, and it always will, no matter what the big facts are. And I think a lot of business owners, building owners, are seeing the business case for the investment in going smarter and to go greener. And smart obviously enables green. So improved occupant health and well-being, greater productivity rates, people more satisfied and happy in spaces. There's actually monetary studies that are proving that businesses and buildings in general, hospitals, hospitality that invest in smart and sustainable are seeing people want to be in those spaces more and can drive up lease rates and also see employees want to stay longer. So there's an inherent business case for the investment in smart and sustainable as well.
Okay. Mike, you want to, I know you've got a lot of history in the ESG area. You want to elaborate on those thoughts?
Sure, Annie's exactly right. ESG is being driven in the last decade really by activist investors who have kind of mutated into a movement that includes very mainstream groups like State Street and BlackRock, some of the largest asset managers in the world. That's a lot of money pressing down, trickling down to the REITs and the big business or big office and warehouse portfolios to force them to take this seriously. At the same time, there are two really important things happening that are more demographic. One is the world is changing. I'm a baby boomer, kind of last years of the baby boom. We're values neutral. Give me a good investment. I don't give a damn where my money is invested type people. I'm not, but that's the generational profile. That's not true of the millennials. And the millennials now, at least in the United States, represent the largest portion of the workforce. If you want to retain a millennial, you better think about these things. They don't want to work for you if you're destroying the earth. They also don't want to invest with you, and they're about to inherit the largest tranche of money from the old inert baby boomers like me. As we pass away, we're going to give our savings, 401ks, and all sorts of other investment portfolios to our kids, and they're not going to just invest them in oil companies. They have a different perspective on the world. They have a concern that we didn't have. Perhaps we were more concerned about nuclear war. Ultimately, extinction tends to motivate.
Yes.
You're seeing that. The final thing is regulatory risk it's become real. The EU this year put together something called the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, which is in effect a lot like GDPR was for data. It is an effort to force banks to be serious about when they claim they are doing green financing. If they greenwash, they're going to be fined. That's going to trickle down to everyone who ends up on the board of directors. There's going to be activist board members pushed by people like BlackRock onto smaller companies' boards where they've invested. And then BlackRock itself has said, you'll either get in line with the smart building green movement, or we'll divest. We will no longer give you money. That's a big hammer to hold over someone's head. So there's all sorts of reasons that this is happening. Last one, just really quickly, is Coving. E in ESG, of course, is environment. For a long time, people who didn't know what they were talking about equated the whole concept with carbon footprint, and that's a vital part of it. The environment and energy management aspect of the E in the ESG was really important. But if anything, COVID really emphasized the S, the social aspect. This is about how you care for people, whether they're customers coming into a space or whether you're staff or whether they're tenants. The S is really important and includes things like transparency, includes things like the wellness of the space they're in, and includes things like the ability for them to feed back without retaliation. There's all sorts of elements that go into that S that were widely misunderstood before COVID. And now, post-COVID, people kind of get it. Oh, yeah, I could die indoors because the space is not safe. So ultimately, it was a accelerant for the whole awareness of this movement.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I think the part about creating a nice work environment is often overlooked, especially with the millennials moving into the workforce. I mean, they're used to working in Starbucks and at home and every place else, and they demand some top-notch amenities and a healthy environment. So people need to be aware of that. We'll move on now to we've kind of established a little bit the societal regulatory reasons for this attention to smart buildings, sustainable buildings. All that's fine and good, but you have to be able to actually do something about it and implement things. So I guess let me ask Roman, from your perspective, what are the technological advancements that have occurred that are now making this smart building a reality and something that's feasible to do cost effectively, for companies?
Hey, thank you for that question. Yeah, so if I was to look back, let's say over the last 3 years, and real estate business was definitely one of the focus areas early on. It's probably the first devices Tectelic developed were focused on real estate business. And when I look at the last 3 years, how it evolved, I would say that initially, the first maybe 3 years back, 4 years back, everybody we interacted in real estate business with their ideas to deploy IoT solutions was mainly focused on reducing the cost of real estate operations. So that was very dominant. So everything was related to how can I save real estate costs? And looking back in 2016, let's say 17, even 2018, when before the pandemic was here, if you look at any company, real estate was generally the largest second cost driver after employees. So there was a lot of focus on how can we leverage the real estate we have and have more people have it, deployed more efficiently for people to use it. Over time, I would say that once we addressed a number of issues related to, we'll call it cost of real estate and operations, and I'll go back and mention some of the use cases, some of the biggest use cases, and obviously the easiest to justify. We noticed that the second phase became, it was more about environment. It's about the people, how they operate in in the office environment, making sure it's more comfortable for people, anything related to the environment and the people and their being in a building. And it doesn't just mean temperature and humidity, what people typically think about. It's actually what we found. Many applications were more related about the infrastructure of the buildings itself. For example, you can have a very large floor, you can have 15, let's say, toilets, whatever, in a building, but if half of them are not functional, it becomes a nuisance for employees. So we have seen a lot of use cases were deployed where you made it actually more environmentally friendly for people to live and operate in. Everything from increasing the spectrum of the lights, replacing the lights with the LED lights, making sure monitoring, and definitely adjusting a lot of HVAC systems. I mean, if you can think about 3-4 years back, it was very common. You will have one temperature sensor per floor. Many of our customers today have 15, 20 temperature sensors per floor, different locations, and they'll adjust depending on, HVAC, if it's a winter, summer, things like that. And I would say the last year, obviously with the pandemic, we've seen substantially increased number of use cases that are related to personal hygiene, social distancing, contact tracing, and let's say CO2 monitoring. So today, when we talk to lots of the same companies, they actually moved from just saving real estate cost, and it's all about people are going to come back to work. How are we going to make this environment safer for people? Because we all understand, even with the vaccines, COVID is going to stay with us for a few years probably, especially depending on the country where you are. And people cannot really stay home for a few years more, right? It's not probably even socially healthy for people. So we do see a change today where it's more focused on hygiene, social distancing, CO2 monitoring, contact tracing, and then mapping the real estate. So we see today many companies that initially used our devices to simply understand how many people are in a particular meeting room, how often they're used. Today, actually, they use the same technology to say, those meeting rooms have been used too often. You really should go and use the other meeting rooms. And these meeting rooms should be clean in this time frame. So I would say that's the progression we have seen over some period of time. Now, I would underline that it doesn't matter what we do and who does it. Everything what we deploy has to be very simple to deploy, very simple to operate, and have a very clear and undisputed value. Because if you're trying to sell something to an operator, let's say of a large building or companies who manage facilities, and they don't understand the value, it's going to be very difficult for them to sell it to their customers. So all it underpins that the solutions we provide have to be very easy to deploy, very easy to operate, and they should really have an undisputed value. It shouldn't be something that we're spending hours and hours upon telling people that there is value in this solution.
Okay, thank you, Roman. Andy, I'd like to ask you sort of the same kind of question. Superior Essex has been in business a long time. Been involved in providing the materials and things that go into building infrastructure, communications infrastructure. Many of us here are, involved in wireless technology, which is a fairly new thing with IoT. But from your perspective, how have things changed, over time in the types of materials that you now make available? Maybe your supply chain that you're concerned about, in getting those materials into the buildings. How is Superior Essex looking at this?
Sure. So I kind of mentioned it when talking a little bit about how we define sustainability. There's been an IoT evolution as we're talking about today. And as a communication cable manufacturer, we have been the plumbing to enable communications technology throughout the built environment for years. But we're really seeing an evolution in which case both code and design is enabling communication cable to play a much larger role in powering and not only providing data, which is what we've traditionally been doing to devices, but also now powering devices at the same time through power over Ethernet. And so up to 90 watts of power can now be provided from a communication cable to an end device, enabling this pretty expansive world of connectivity, in which case all these devices are talking to each other, which is what we're talking about when we talk about smart. So it's been pretty amazing to see this change and shift from AC power, high power systems that we've traditionally thought about in terms of design to these low voltage DC powered systems brought to you by communication cable. So this has recently been, I mean, we've been talking about this now for many years, but it is a relatively recent occurrence that this has become more of an opportunity due to changes of code and awareness of what and how these systems can be installed within the built environment and space. And through that, we're seeing CapEx and OpEx savings. We're seeing greater reduction in energy usage. And the reason being is because of the data collection that everybody's been talking about. These systems are really able to capture what is overuse, and through sensors and other tools, we're able to make better educated decisions to make the space, in fact, more sustainable through these types of technology systems.
Okay. So Stefan and Mike, let me ask you, because I know you both have offer solutions based on wireless LoRaWAN based technologies. How I guess what other technologies have enabled you to come to market now as opposed to maybe 10 years ago? And I'm talking about things like cloud, machine learning. How has that impacted your ability to offer something? And we'll start with Stefan.
Yeah, I think technology is one thing, and I think from a technology point of view, we have had it for quite a long time. The big shift now is both that it is more harmonized, so it's easy to install. It is more safety for people to install it, since they know that you're not locked into a proprietary system. And also that a lot of the data that we, for example, use now for COVID tracing or for COVID alarms, it has been available, but it's been locked in to different silos, etc. So I think the biggest shift now is both that technology is mature, people are aware, and data is more unleashed, and people are interested to make information out of the data in order to make good decisions, etc. And as an example, for example, in the Spanish elections here, we installed a lot of carbon dioxide sensors in the polling stations in order and provided that data, so both for the people that were voting, but also to the management of the buildings, in order to make sure that the polling station was safe from a COVID perspective. And none of this was totally new, but just the ease of deployment and the accessibility of data and the way to push out data to meaningful information. I think that is probably the big shift.
Yeah, excellent. And Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I would second everything Stefan just said. I think the other aspect of it is that it's now clear within organizations that this is a demand on their staffs, on their budgets. They're being asked, just like we get asked, for a report before the board meeting on whatever performance metric is being discussed. People who operate buildings, people who are in new constituencies, HR, the general counsel's office are worried about liability as people come back to work. HR is worried about retention. They're worried about complaints from people for the wellness of the space. You've got all sorts of people moving beyond the facilities management kind of types who have generally been what you might call the point of sales for smart building technology. So now you've got this team of people who have the interest in seeing this stuff deployed, and they're also being asked the kind of questions that this data will answer. And to the extent that they can automate that means you don't waste somebody's time with a clipboard running around looking at thermometers and meters, and ultimately, it's an expensive proposition. You ladle on top of that the regulatory requirements that are coming, And that becomes a headcount or two involved in collecting sustainability data, which is unnecessary in many cases. You can automate that. And on top of that, it's empirical. It's actual data, not the nonsense that usually passes for ESG metrics these days. It's all voluntary, and it's the response to surveys sent out by ESG metrics companies. So this is a game changer. The technology behind it made it all possible, as Stefan said. The fact that it's easy to deploy and that IT doesn't have to get involved, that's a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Josh, I'm going to switch back to you for a second and reference something that is in the white paper I saw. And that was, so, you know, you talk about sustainability, green building technology has been, you know, something that's a term that's been around for a number of years. Most people know what that means. There's this concept of a blue building that I saw in the white paper. Could you explain what that is a little bit more?
Sure, Byron. So let's start with kind of what you were joking out there. High performance, green, sustainable, they all mean the same thing, right? It just depends on what you're talking about, who's talking at that moment, and how it comes up. So that all means these, Stefan mentioned it earlier, some of the rating systems, the LEED, the BREEAMs, the Green Star Australias, a number of different countries around the world have different programs. LEED and BREEAM are probably your upper tier. Green Globe's also that does it a lot around the world. Those green buildings are looking to save energy, water, minimize human health impacts, things of that nature. When you're talking about a blue building, you're going beyond saving. Well, what's beyond, you know, saving concepts is giving back, right? So a blue building, probably our most famous one here in North America is called the Bullitt Center out of Seattle, Washington, here in the United States. They actually have solar panels beyond their roof line, right? They actually had to get approval from the city of Seattle and the codes there to actually build their solar panel a little bit bigger than their building footprint. So it actually ends up going out over the sidewalks, right? Which typically isn't allowed. Anyone who owns or operates a building says, hey, wait a minute, I'm not allowed to go into that space. That's public space. And they do this because they were worried about providing enough power for their own building. Well, come to find out, it's been very good because they've been able to give power back to the grid, right? So they're not just saving their own energy footprint, right? They're actually giving that power back. They're also doing the same with water on their landscaping. Their rain capture for flushing their toilets and things of that nature. They're actually giving some of that water back to the water grid. So again, this concept of a blue building is something that smart buildings can help us take, you know, yes, smart buildings, the Internet of Tomorrow, all this that everyone's talked about, Stefan, Roman, Mike, Annie, yourself, all of your technology can help us be more sustainable, but I'm also incredibly hopeful that it can take us from sustainable to giving back, right? So our buildings aren't this you know, sink of things. They're actually, you know, a supplier of things. You think about some of these windows that you hear out of a lot of universities they're embedding PV into windows now. Imagine if your windows weren't just there to help the heating and cooling of your building and give good views, but they're actually supplying power, right? And Annie mentioned the technology that's helping us do that. So that's the concept of going from green to blue.
Okay, great. And it's probably an opportune time now to kind of segue into a discussion about tools that are available on the market for somebody to self-assess or hire somebody to come and assess their sustainability or their environmental footprint, those kind of things. Josh, we'll start with you again with the Spire program. Maybe you could explain what you've put together with TIA and the resources that are now available to people.
Yeah, Byron, and thanks. And by saying that TIA and UL did this, they might be the sponsoring organizations and the two standard setting organizations that got together. But it was certainly hundreds of subject matter experts that came together to help create this standard. and basically looking at different categories of what makes a building smart. Again, I'll speak to my specific area. We didn't want to recreate things like LEED or Green Globes or the International Green Construction Code. Those are already there. We don't need another rating system. I promise you, building owners and operators don't want just another rating system for the sake of a rating system. What we wanted to do was say, okay, what are you doing in energy savings to make the building smart? What are you doing in safety to make the building smart? And we have individual rankings of that where you can go through, and again, you mentioned the self-assessment. You can go through the Spire system and self-assess to understand where you are. And then if you want to go beyond that to truly promote, hey, we are a smart building. We are doing things beyond the quote unquote norm in these specific categories, then you can go and get certified. And that goes through the TIA UL process. And you can actually use the Spire name to talk about where you are. But again, it was a very interesting conversation because we would have these conversations, Byron. I know Annie and I were on the sustainability group together where we would be sitting and saying, this would be really cool. And then all of a sudden we realized, well, wait, that's just a sustainable concept. What makes it a smart, sustainable concept? And how do we rate that going forward? So I think it's a really cool program. I'm really excited that we've launched it, and hopefully a lot of people will be able to go through, do that self-assessment, understand where they are, and then go through full certification.
Okay, and I guess people could find out more about that, link to it in the white paper,
Yep.
You know, if they take a look at that. Okay. Roman, I'd like to ask you maybe both you know, in terms of Tectelic, and I know you're very active in the LoRa Alliance. You know, many people are familiar with you know, cellular technology, Wi-Fi technology, those kind of things. But you know, one of the things that has enabled buildings to become smarter is the advent of low power wireless technology, specifically developed for IoT. Can you talk a little bit about you know, the certification program within the LoRa Alliance, and then maybe why Tectelic chose LoRa as the basis, or LoRaWAN as the basis for the solutions that you offer for sustainability?
Yeah, so Tectelic has a long history in the wireless technology. If you go back to, I guess, originally where we came from, Nortel and Ericsson, it's, you know, we started with a 2G, and really some people started with the 1G technology. So it's really, we went all the way from 1G to now 5G. We do build today products that are 4G and 5G. But when you look at the actual IoT deployments, the first thing that really comes down, why would somebody go with LoRaWAN versus, let's say, 4G or 5G technologies? It's just the access to spectrum. Like there is nothing really, you know, I understand the value of LoRaWAN technology from a technical point of view, and the let's say spread spectrum and the cost per bit, if you will. And if you compare it really to some of the, let's say, NB-IoT technologies, you could argue it's almost the same. However, in order to deploy NB-IoT technology, you need to own spectrum. And that is very expensive. I mean, spectrum is by far the most expensive asset for any wireless operator, versus LoRaWAN can be deployed in unlicensed spectrum, whatever you call it, you know, ISM and spectrums in North America, or unlicensed globally. So right there, you don't really need to be an operator. You can be just you and me at home. We can deploy systems, or we can be a small operator in enterprises, or we can be very large enterprise and we can deploy LoRaWAN networks. So Tectelic decision was based on how can we, if we manufacture high value products that is going to be the lowest cost to operate, how we can leverage the other asset, and that is really the spectrum, to be the lowest cost solutions globally. So that's what brought us really to LoRaWAN. And when we compare LoRaWAN to other technologies like at Sigfox, in my personal opinion, LoRaWAN has significant advantages technically compared to Sigfox, even from the fact that it actually has a reverse link and other things. So it wasn't a very difficult decision for people who really understand wireless technology, why we should go with LoRaWAN. When we think about now specifically, and we're focusing on the, let's say, in-building solutions, because we talked about sustainable buildings, there isn't really today a more cost-effective solution that I know. You can cover a 5-story, a 10-story building, a 20-story building than LoRaWAN. Because First of all, you get the same, effectively, what we call RF range or channel, 160 dB, that you would get from NB-IoT. That is a very complex technology. So you can deploy a very small gateway. I mean, I have a number of them here. I mean, a typical gateway that will be $200 or so, approximately like that, will cover a 5-story building. So when we compare cost of LoRaWAN deploying let's say in building infrastructures to, let's say, Wi-Fi, for example, you need to spend typically 10 to 20 times more on the Wi-Fi infrastructure compared to LoRaWAN infrastructure. So if one gateway will cover 5 stories, it's typically you would need to have five or six maybe Wi-Fi access points per floor just to cover the same area. So from providing very cost-effective coverage in a building, there isn't really, again, a more cost-effective solution today. And then really probably why we really like LoRaWAN was because it's a standard solution. We can go and talk for a long period of time, discuss about the value of proprietary solutions, and there's always going to be a slightly better proprietary solution developed for a certain application. But the problem with the proprietary solutions is that's what they are. They're proprietary. They're designed by a certain company, of a small number of companies, and they have only a few number of solutions that can be deployed. With LoRaWAN, I mean, I mentioned Tiktaalik today already has 15 different sensors. With that, we probably have more than 30 different applications because multiple sensors used in a number of these applications. And you can imagine, we have today, I think, a network of about 400 already LoRaWAN members, and many of them are same suppliers as Tiktaalik. They build sensors, so we can leverage very large ecosystem of solutions. So if some devices Tiktaalik doesn't have today, for example, we work very closely with the MC Climate. It's a company out of Bulgaria that monitors the radiator's temperature. We don't have those devices, but we have a lot of customers who are interested in it, so we offer them the solution. I know we work with a number of different solutions with TalkPole we're discussing here. So the value of ecosystem here is very significant, and it's beyond any particular company. And that will be probably why Tiktaalik focused our significant resources in developing LoRaWAN solutions.
All right, thank you, Roman. I'm going to kind of wrap up the conversation part of this, so we have time for questions. Thank you, everybody, for your participation today. In case those on the listening to the webcast are interested in sharing with other people, all the content will be available within 24 hours for on-demand viewing. You can just click on the link in the Destination LoRaWAN resource list. You can go to the LoRaWAN Destination LoRaWAN Resource Hub, and you'll find all sorts of other on-demand content there as well. So really appreciate your time joining us today. Just give us a few minutes here, or a few seconds, and we will begin the Q&A part of the session with your live questions.
Okay, so on to the good stuff here. We'll take some of the questions from the audience that were generated by the panel discussion. We don't have a ton of time, so I'm just going to jump right into it and keep things moving here pretty quickly. So the first one, let's ask you, Roman. We had a question come in about security on the latest LoRaWAN release. Could you make a comment about the security?
Of course. So I have to say, since the very beginning, when I actually started working on LoRaWAN in 2016, we looked at the standard, looked at the security, and there's really nothing in a standard LoRaWAN standard that is really not secure. It's a very well standard, well defined the security between the devices and the gateway, the network server, the application server, and then the application server and actually end applications. So there's really an end-to-end security, and then there's actually security levels between each of the elements of the system. And it's actually on par today with the NB-IoT or Cat-M devices that we're also building. So from a standard point of view, it's a very secure, I would say, standard, and in 4 years we never had any breaches. Now, how people implement it, I think that matters. So sometimes, for example, if people, for example, they get the security keys, and especially end customers or operators, and maybe they maybe treat them a little bit more too liberal, that could lead to actually, some kind of an infringement on security. But and I don't know honestly if there was ever any in a LoRaWAN. I know obviously there were some other ecosystems in other standards, but we never had. And from a standard point of view, it's a very secure standard. Like honestly, we don't feel we need to do anything more. And with the current with the current LoRaWAN standard upgrades, there is actually more focus now how to ensure that people manage the keys, especially end customers. I believe it shouldn't be an issue, but it should be treated very seriously.
No, thank you for explaining that. And I agree 100% with you. I'm just while you're kind of online here, we did have a question come in about how easy it would be to deploy LoRaWAN in a Caribbean country. I think you could kind of extrapolate that to really any country. But could you just briefly comment on what it would be like to deploy in any kind of country?
For sure. I mean, we have today already networks in the Caribbean countries. I obviously don't know which country it is they're referring to, but it's very easy. It also really depends if you're trying to deploy a nationwide coverage, or let's say you want to cover a university or some enterprise. We actually deal with some enterprises, and we were able to work with the obviously end customers and cover an enterprise in a matter of weeks. It took more time to discuss what they need and what they want to do than actually to ship them the equipment. And once you ship the equipment, and generally it's done like with all other partners we know and that we work with, we configure, provision everything. We ship the equipment, so they say the gateway, the devices. We explain how they operate the customer, provide online training. They power up the gateways. The gateways get connected instantly to the network server that we provision for them. The devices start working. They also provision, and the customers start testing. There isn't really anything to do. And Caribbean countries, most of them, I think maybe even all, follow in the same standard as the North American. So it's actually 902 to 928. So it's a very easy. It's the same system. So I would say it's a matter of weeks, or maybe even a week if it's a small deployment, to obviously maybe months if it's actually nationwide or countrywide deployment. But there's really any limitation. There's nothing specific anybody needs to do.
Okay, great, thank you. Just moving along here quickly. So very relevant question. We have a question here which I'll direct to Mike about sort of the relevance in the healthcare industry for monitoring things like infectious viruses and, the indoor air quality beyond temperature and humidity. Obviously, pretty important topic on everybody's mind right now, but I know Microshare has some experience in this. And Mike, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Byron. Our experience has been both in the U.S. and Europe. And we really piloted this several years ago at NHS hospitals in the UK, where we started with a sensor kind of mashup that we call predictive cleaning that was deployed in common areas, and in particular in the toilets, not the toilet itself, obviously, but that's just the British term for the restroom. The findings were fantastic in terms of efficiency, and the cleaners were very happy to be able to increase customer satisfaction. But the byproduct that no one expected was that hospital initiated infections actually went down. And anyone in the healthcare industry knows that HAIs are hospital-associated infections, are incredibly difficult, because these are the source of viral antibiotic resistance bacteria that kill people in hospitals. This is a massive liability challenge, and it's an enormous challenge for medical science, because these bacteria are difficult to fight. So that has been a huge eye-opener. Now, you throw on top of that the global pandemic, and you've got a new awareness everywhere, not just among facilities managers, but among the people, the patients that are coming in, the nursing staff, the support staff, the doctors, that what is actually happening inside a building can kill you. this is not a nice to have anymore. They want to know, for instance, humidity at certain levels. Humidity is better than at other levels in sustaining a viral, infectious course. So humidity, knowing humidity is a very important thing. Again, there's also the non-COVID related aspects of this. CO2 buildup in any building is a proven source of productivity loss. And if anybody's ever been in a building built in the 70s or 80s where you can't open the windows and the HVAC system is either too cold or too hot, that's a classic example of a place where CO2 builds up by the middle of the afternoon, and you're basically about to fall asleep unless you eat chocolate and drink another coffee. So, I mean, these are all the types of things that are relevant specifically to healthcare, but also to buildings of all sorts.
Okay, great. Thank you. There have been a couple of questions come in about the biggest obstacle for deploying LoRaWAN in the North American market, and I'll just address that myself very quickly. So there really aren't any. Anybody can deploy a LoRaWAN network. It operates in an unlicensed frequency band. It's kind of like your garage door opener would. So anybody can buy the components and put a solution together, or there are many systems integrators and solution providers on the market that can do that for you. So there's really nothing stopping deployment in North America. There are a number of different initiatives going on right now to offer essentially public network service. So you would subscribe to a service provided by somebody else, which is another option available to people. A second sort of related question that came in was on cellular infrastructure. Is it still cost effective to have LoRaWAN? Again, I'll address that quickly, which is to say that, it's really addressing two different things. LoRaWAN is going to provide the best battery life for any battery operated devices. It's a very low data rate, so it's not going to provide tons of bandwidth, but for most IoT applications, it's completely suitable. And so the cost of deploying it is very low compared to most other technologies because of the range. You don't have to put many access points or what we call gateways in, and you can cover an entire building very easily. So let's go on to a couple. Let me move now to, I guess, the sort of financial part of the equation here. I think, from my perspective, sitting here in North America, perhaps Europe is a little further along in terms of, the underlying financial infrastructure and incentives towards sustainable and smart buildings. Stefan, I'll address this to you because you're located in the market there. What sort of programs are available, and what's the evolution of the financial incentives structures in the European market?
Yes, this is a really important and a driving factor in Europe, and it is a lot of the green bonds for ESG investments. And only in Europe, or totally the ESG bonds, it is about $250 billion that has been launched, and about 55% of in euros. So Europe has a huge share of that. And the reasons why real estate owners are doing this is that they can package an investment to improve the sustainability of a building into a green bond, and they're getting like 10 to 45 points lower rate on their interest. So there are direct incentives to get a building LEED certified, to install an energy optimization solutions or other kind of smart sustainable solutions. And of course, in addition to the value increase of the building and that you can provide a better service to the tenants as well.
Okay. I'm mindful of the time. Unfortunately, we did not get to a lot of the questions that we have here. There will be a follow-up email that's sent out telling you how you can access the recording, et cetera. We will try to answer some of those questions from some of you that we did not get to today. I want to thank everybody for joining and listening in. I hope you picked up some interesting information. And, you know, keep in mind there are other Destination LoRaWAN webcasts available for on-demand viewing, and I encourage you to check those out. Thanks again for your joining today.